Welcome to my garden. My name is Brenda. I've been raising monarchs in my home for many summers, and I've had lots of questions about the process and if you could do it too. So I'm here to share some tips and ideas on what the process is and how to go about raising monarch butterflies. So to start off with, the first and most important thing for raising monarchs is the host plant. All butterflies have a host plant. So that means that's the plant that the adult prefers or seeks out to lay their eggs on. So for monarchs, that's milkweed. And then there's many varieties of milkweed. In my yard, I have swamp milkweed. And I also have a few plants of showy milkweed or common milkweed in my yard also. But the plant of preference that I've noticed is very much the swamp milkweed. It's got a smaller, finer leaf, and it's easier for the little caterpillars to eat. So if the butterfly naturally lays them on the host plant, why would I want to bring them into the house and raise them? Well, part of the reason is that butterfly or eggs that are laid out in the yard in the wild and then left to mature, about 10% reach maturity, reach the stage of being a butterfly, whereas ones that are assisted or hand raised reach about 75 to 85%, make it to a mature butterfly. The part of the struggle that butterflies are having, the monarch especially, is that it has to have milkweed. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term loco weed, but what that is milkweed, and it's toxic to cattle. So throughout the Midwest in the United States, it's wiped out. Farmers remove it from their pasture land, and thus the butterfly doesn't have its host plant. So it's important for urban gardeners like us to plant milkweed in our yards and in our parks and in our communities to replace the milkweed that would have been out in the pasture land or out in the wild that the butterflies normally would have had access to. So back to why I would bring it in the house. Well, what happens? Why does only 10% make it to maturity out in my yard? Well, it's because of predators. Things like ants. Ants love to snack on the eggs that are laid on the plants, and stink bugs will eat the mature or caterpillars if they can find them on the plants, and parasitic wasps will lay their eggs on the caterpillar, and it'll go through the whole process of pupating and maturing. But instead of a butterfly emerging out of the chrysalis in the end, you get a stinky little parasitic wasp. So those are the primary reasons why we bring them in and protect them. The other thing that endangers them is the spraying of chemicals to keep the mosquitoes down, especially the spraying for cankerworms and forest tent caterpillars. That chemical that's sprayed also impacts the caterpillar that's on other types of caterpillars. So those are the main reasons why I bring them in. Now, when I go out hunting for eggs, what I'm looking for is a little tiny white dot. It's about the size of a sprinkle, like the sprinkles you put on your ice cream. It's about that size, and it is stuck to the egg. It's heavily glued on so that in a rainstorm it won't fall off. And then what I do is I pick that leaf from the plant. I put it in a container that has a damp paper towel on it. I put a few holes in the container for air access. I particularly like fast food takeout containers, the ones from Chinese food that have the clear lid that you can see into the container and see what's going on. So from egg to caterpillar, we're looking at about 5 days or so, depending on the temperature and all of that. And then the little caterpillar, which is about the size of a little pencil mark, will eat its way out of the egg. And you'll notice, if you're watching your eggs closely, you'll all of a sudden see it almost form a little tiny black dot on the top, and that's the top of the caterpillar's head working its way out of the egg. So then the process begins. So the caterpillar, I leave those little teeny tiny caterpillars in that little takeout container until they reach about their second instar. Now, an instar is a term that's used to identify stages of molting in insects. So butterflies go through 5, or monarch butterflies anyways, go through 5 instars. So they molt 5 times. What that means is that, like you and I, our bodies grow and our cells expand and our skin continues to grow as we grow, but that doesn't happen for insects. So the caterpillar, it grows till its skin is too tight on it, at which point then it molts its skin and then it continues to grow. So it'll do that 5 times. So now that I've brought it in and it's now into its second, going into its third instar stage, so it's gone from being the size of a pencil mark to about the thickness of a straw. It needs to be on a plant that has a piece of a plant as opposed to a leaf. And then now we have to worry about what kind of a container we're going to keep it in. The caterpillars will primarily stay on their host plant. They won't migrate around as long as they are in the growing phases. It's after they're finished growing and they're ready to pupate and form their chrysalis is when they migrate off the plant. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. You need a container to contain them. I have 2 things that I particularly like. You may find things that you like better. One is an inverted tomato cage I use, and I use it almost like the frame to a tent. So, and I trim off the long legs of the tomato cage that would normally have gone into the ground. I use duct tape to tape that up to seal the top up. And then I tape that to a round tray. I just happened to have lucked out and found a flat round tray that I like, and I duct tape that down to the tray. And then the tent or the covering, I use bridal tool like netting. And actually, I like black best of all, because if I'm taking pictures or watching through it, you can actually see through the black better than any other color. Your eye seems to ignore the netting, and you're able to be able to watch what's happening inside. And then milkweed. What I do is, because I have a very large amount of milkweed in my yard, I cut pieces of plant that I cut. I leave a good 5 or 6 inch stalk on the plant, because it will produce more ends off of that stalk. It'll keep growing. So I cut a piece off of the stalk. I use a mason jar that still has its lid but not the cap part, and I put a piece of plastic, I put water in the mason jar, put plastic over the top of that jar, and then twist the lid back on and pop some holes in the plastic so that the milkweed has some support, and also so your caterpillar doesn't accidentally walk down the stalk or fall into the water. I've had it happen. It's very sad. You come to check your caterpillars in the morning and you've got a caterpillar at the bottom of the jar. It's demoralizing. So now you've got your container and your caterpillars, your netting, and your caterpillars are munching away and are as happy as can be. What you're going to notice at the bottom of the container is, when they're smaller, it's going to look like a lot of black dust. When they get bigger, you're going to be very clear on what it is. It's caterpillar droppings or fezz or poop. And that needs to be cleaned up regularly. It could contain bacteria or harbor parasites that can infect your caterpillars. So your containers need to be cleaned out regularly. Every second day when they're smaller, every day when they get to be quite a bit bigger, especially depending on the number of caterpillars you're hosting in your container. Another container that I quite like is a laundry hamper, a mesh laundry hamper, and I found them at IKEA. I found them a couple years ago at IKEA. I haven't been able to locate them since. So I'm hoping that this year they'll be in stock and I can obtain a few more of those. The one thing with them is the bottom of them are mesh, and again, it's hard to clean. So I've cut a piece of cardboard that fits in the bottom of the basket that I can easily remove and clean or replace. So those are kind of the few little tricks about that. So now you've got a container and you've got your caterpillars. You're regularly supplying them with fresh milkweed. And then, oh my goodness, you run out of milkweed. What do you do? Well, a few locations that I've found milkweed that I've supplied my caterpillars with is I've gone biking and found milkweed growing wild, especially along the I think it's Sterling Lion Way, just past IKEA. As you go to Fort White, if you go in the back way, like where the big hill is at Fort White, there's a whole bunch of wild milkweed growing there. And I've actually gone and cut milkweed from there in a pinch when I've run out of milkweed. Now your little caterpillars have grown and they're big. And then one day you look at them and they look like they're going to die. They look terrible. They're hanging, they're attached to the top of the container or off the edge of the container, and they're in the strangest shape. This is an exciting time. It's referred to as hanging as a J or going into a J formation. It means the caterpillar is done being a caterpillar and it's preparing to transform into a chrysalis. And so what'll happen, it'll form a silk button that it makes and it attaches itself, it glues itself to a safe place. And then as it's hanging there, you'll notice all of a sudden it'll start flipping and twisting all over the place. And um, and you'll wonder what's happening. And what's happening actually is that it is preparing to molt its skin for one last time. And up the back of the chrysalis, you'll see it split, and a green glob will appear out of that, and um, and it'll continue to roll its skin up, and it will hang as a very wet chrysalis. It is super delicate at that point in time. Do not attempt to touch it or move it at that point, if at all possible, because it's very fragile. As the chrysalis dries, the outside of it is called a cuticle. As the cuticle dries, the chrysalis becomes hard, almost hard and waxy. And at that point, if you need to move it, it's possible. But if you can leave it where it is to go through the whole process, it's best. So from caterpillar to from hatching from the egg to this point, about 8 to 10 days have lapsed. Now the chrysalis is going to hang there. It's an amazing, once it's dry, it's going to be a dark jade color. You'll see a gold band around it with gold dots. I have explored and looked for stories and legends around that. I have not ever found anything or why that materializes on the chrysalis, but it's absolutely beautiful. Inside that chrysalis is the butterfly, basically in liquid form. And over the next 10 days or so, the DNA within that chrysalis and that butterfly will start forming the butterfly, and the pieces will start coming together. And as time passes, the chrysalis will become less and less green to a point where it'll become transparent, and you will actually be able to see the butterfly inside the chrysalis with all of its black and orange colors all hanging there. Now, once that reach that point, you'll know the butterfly is about to emerge. And what will happen will be the backside of the chrysalis will crack. It's actually an audible pop you'll hear. And the backside, almost like a little escape hatch, will flip open, and the butterfly will work his way or her way out of the chrysalis and stand there hanging onto the chrysalis. The butterfly will look like it's come out of the laundry. It's like a pack, you know, when you take your laundry out of the washing machine, it's all squished up and all not in its real shape. Well, that's how the butterfly will look. Its thorax will be very swollen. It'll hold a whole bunch of liquid that it'll need to push into the wings, which will open and expand the wings. You'll also notice a orangey red liquid will drip from the butterfly's thorax, and that is meconium. And what that is the waste product from the process of transforming from a caterpillar to a butterfly, and the butterfly will expel that. So you'll get this little puddle of orangey rust-colored liquid, and it's perfectly normal. Your butterfly is fine. And then you will watch. It'll take a couple hours, and the butterfly will push the liquid that's in its thorax into its wings and puff the wings out. And during that time, the butterfly will be moving the wings back and forth. It's quite fragile. If you actually touch it, the wings will almost feel like wet tissue paper. And as the butterfly dries, and you know, if you touch at the butterfly, you'll feel the wings becoming firmer and harder. And that's, like I said, about a couple-hour process. And at that point, providing that the weather is all positive and it's not pouring rain outside, you can take your butterfly outside and place it on a flower and let it nectar and get ready to fly off. So you've gone through the whole process from egg to butterfly, and that's about a 22, 25, 27-day process. I know some of you have heard about butterflies that fly to Mexico or California. Well, that happens in early fall. In Canada, the butterflies who start leaving to head south were the first butterflies to start leaving, and that it happens towards the latter part of August, and that's actually called the super generation. Those butterflies that emerge, you'll notice, are a smidge bigger than all the other butterflies you've raised throughout the year. Well, they're not able to reproduce. And all their energy goes into preparing them to start the journey to fly to Mexico, and where they overwinter in mountains just around Mexico City. And it's quite a remarkable process. I participate in a project with an organization called Monarch Watch, and I tag that generation of butterflies with the children, and we record the numbers and we send that information off to the universities. And it's with that information that they've got over 10 years worth of documentation now on the migration process, and they've learned so much about what's happening with the monarchs. So I think that sums up my knowledge and expertise on raising monarchs, and I'm excited that you want to learn a little bit more. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But happy monarch raising.